Welcome to Tigray Television. We're here with news and analysis from around Tigray. Stay tuned. Itacho Rada, a member of Tigray Central Command, held a briefing on Wednesday in which he elaborated further on talks with the joint delegation from the United States and the European Union. He said representatives from his government stressed on the need for a constitutional resolution to the issue of Western Tigray and said he believed that this could possibly determine the fate of the Ethiopian state. Abel Zagabu has the report.
Itacho Reda, a member of Tigray Central Command, in a briefing on Wednesday, said his government in its meeting with the special envoys had stressed on the need for a constitutional resolution to the issue of Western Tigray, and said it was imperative for peace and stability, not only in the ongoing conflict, but for the future of the Ethiopian state.
For us, it was a very productive meeting. We were able to explain our position candidly, and of course, we have reason to believe that we have been able to clear up some confusion in this regard. But the most important concern we told them is, unless the question of Western Tigray is resolved in a manner that restores the status quo, that restores administration, Tigray administration, that chastises the Amhara authorities, the federal authorities, and their Eritrean partners to undo what they have achieved by force. And then that would amount to writing a prescription for national disintegration, because to allow them to get away with Western Tigray is to encourage them to go ahead with their strident, extremist, nationalist, irredentist agenda. That would spell disaster to Ethiopia as we know it. So to the extent that the special envoys and the representatives of these important countries are worried about the continuity of the Ethiopian state, they should pay enough attention to what transpires in Western Tigray, because whatever happens in Western Tigray will determine the fate of the country.
Getachew also discussed on the need to put in place a system that ensures the sustained delivery of humanitarian assistance into Tigray, and said anything less would draw a false image of the situation on the ground.
Humanitarian access issue is one area we discussed, and of course we've explained to them that the international community is giving the wrong signal to the authorities in Addis Ababa by praising them to the skies for improvement in humanitarian access. For one thing, humanitarian access, hampering humanitarian access issue should be punished. It is a far cry from the kind of the kind of challenge that we are facing, but the fact that even 17 trucks after 6 months of obstruction have been allowed to cross Tigray border simply becomes a very welcome news on the part of the international community. That's a travesty, because a government that should have been punished for not doing, for obstructing humanitarian access, which is an international crime, would be welcomed for relenting on its chokehold simply because it has allowed 17 or 27 trucks. This is a travesty.
Regarding the restoration of basic services, Getachew said his government expected for services to be restored immediately after his government provided guarantee to the Ethiopian government and the international community to secure the safety of technicians to travel to the state to repair any damage.
Now that people we respect, people who we take seriously, come here and ask us to give a written guarantee that we would cooperate with technical experts, although we know this is one of the flimsiest excuses to come up with for Abiy's government to renege on its promise to restore services. We have, however, agreed in the hope that the UN, the US government, and the European Union and other partners would help in monitoring the implementation of such a promise. Whether that happens would remain to be seen, but it doesn't require a huge amount of time or a huge amount of infrastructural adjustment to make it happen. If what they are saying is true, that they are not doing what they want to do to restore services because of lack of security guarantee, the fact that we have now offered security guarantee Does it require another week to ponder over? It does require another week to analyze. It is simply a statement of fact that we are furnishing evidence and our partners will be monitoring the process. And if they really have the best of intentions, no ifs, no buts, all they have to do is carry out the plan. We're ready to cooperate. Humanitarian access, likewise.
Responding to reports of mass detention of Tigrayans held in multiple internment camps across Ethiopia, and if they are released would be part of a negotiation process, Getachew said the detention were crimes and that his government expected for their immediate and unconditional release.
We're not going to make those things part of negotiations. They're downright crimes. We're not going to negotiate over stuff, crimes. We continue to call upon authorities in Afar, authorities in Addis Ababa, to release Tigrayans, including military personnel who served their country with distinction. They are being detained indefinitely, not because they have committed any crime, but rather because they are from Tigray.
The UN International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia returned after paying its first visit to Addis Ababa. A statement issued on United Nations website said that the Commission held meetings with the Deputy Prime Minister and other officials in which it stressed on the need for immediate and unlimited access to different areas across the country. The experts are expected to submit a written report to the human rights groups regarding the visit in September 2022, where the body holds its next session. The Commission of Human Rights Experts was established by the UN's Human Council in mid-December and was given a one-year mandate to investigate reports of atrocities in the ongoing conflict. An investigative report by the Globe and Mail has revealed the rape and torture of male prisoners attempting to escape hunger and torture in internment camps in western Tigray. The interview features the 4 survivors that say they are suffering from psychological as well as physical traumas following the attack by Amhara militia. Our reporter Salome Tigrai has more.
An investigation by the Globe and Mail on previously undocumented atrocities in the area has revealed new evidence of horrific sexual violence against young men in western Tigray. The outlet was able to speak with 4 male survivors who said they had been raped and tortured after attempting to escape from one of many concentration camps in the town of Humara. One of the survivors stated that detainees were beaten and tortured on a daily basis and were denied food. Amhara neighbors, according to the survivors, that tried to bring food to Tigrayans would be isolated by the community. Another survivor said that hunger at the detention centers had become unbearable, forcing him, his cousin, and 2 other detainees to attempt a risky escape and cross over to Sudan. But on their way, he says Amhara militia caught them, beat and tortured them until the early hours, and then took turns raping them. The young men were then tied and abandoned, and later found by Tigrayans fleeing to Sudan. The survivors stated that they are suffering from psychological trauma and often have suicidal thoughts. This, in addition to physical injuries they had sustained as a result of the violence, including bladder dysfunction. Western Tigray has seen one of the worst atrocities since the start of the conflict, with Ethiopian forces, including Amhara militia and Fano, committing wide-scale and systematic violence on Tigrayan civilians as part of an ethnic cleansing campaign to raid the area of its majority Tigrayan population.
Desta Haile Selassie is a postdoctoral research fellow at Howard University. When the war started in November of 2020 and all communications in the region went silent, him and his friend established an online media platform dedicated to bringing to light atrocities in the region. Desta was tasked with the responsibility of compiling a list of victims' names, a list that 20 months later, and despite the comprehensive communications blackout, contains the name of 3,000 civilian victims of the atrocities. Our reporter Sarun Tsagai had a brief stay with Desta.
In November of 2021, the Associated Press reported on the story of Desta Haile Selassie, a young man who had been documenting the names of victims of atrocities in the ongoing war on Tigray. him and his friends from Tighat, an online media platform founded after the start of the war that also featured a comprehensive communications blackout, was solely dedicated to documenting and bringing to light the horrific violence that was perpetrated on civilians and civilian property. Desta, a postdoctoral researcher at Howard University, was tasked with the sole responsibility of compiling a list of victims, a list that now contains the name of 3,291 names.
When the team from the Associated Press interviewed me back, if I remember correctly, I think it was back in November, the total list of victims we had was about 3,100, to be precise, 3,116. And the current list that we have is, I think it's about 3,291, close to 3,300.
Desta fears that the list is only but a drop in comparison to the sea of crimes that were committed in Tigray during Tigray's 8 months-long occupation by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces in 2020 and 2021, a fear that is confirmed by the difficulties he faces to collect information from Tigray. For months, Desta had depended on handwritten lists of victims smuggled out of Tigray, posts on social media, and reports by international outlets. But since the start of the siege on Tigray in June of 2021, Desta says there's little to nothing coming out of the region.
I think this is the reason why we have about 3,300 victims so far. And as you know, the number of civilian victims is much more than that. But before June 2021, we have very courageous people helping us from Tigray, on the ground in Tigray, from every district in Tigray, who used to send us handwritten notes about the list of victims, images about the list of victims. I also collect data from social media, posts from family members in the diaspora, or it could be in other parts of Ethiopia. And we also get reports from well-researched articles, human rights organizations or international medias.
Desta has 19 relatives on the list, including an uncle who was killed by Eritrean soldiers after being forced to do manual labor. But he says having a relative on the list does very little to aggravate the pain of having to compile the list at all.
I have about 19 family members from my mother's side. They were massacred by the barbaric Eritrean soldiers on the 2nd of December 2020 in the Goda bottles and glass factory. But to be honest, having relatives or family members in the list that I am doing or that I have been doing for more than 21 months, it doesn't make it any different, because documenting what I have been documenting for more than 21 months, reading the stories and watching these horrifying videos, feels like everyone in the list is a close family member of mine.
According to Desta, close to 92% of the victims on the list are male. Most killings perpetrated by the invading Eritrean forces targeted boys and men aged from 12 up to 49, while more than 2/3 of the victims on the list were aged between 18 up to 49, men in the most productive age range in a society.
So the composition of the victims ranges from, for example, if we take age-wise, especially the barbaric Eritrean soldiers, they were targeting young men from the age of 10, 12 to 49. So I remember we had 2/3 of the victims were from age 18 to 49, and this is called the most productive age bracket in the society. And if we see the analysis on a gender basis, so 91.8% of them were male and 7.6% of them were female, and the rest 0.6% of them are unknown.
Recently, Desta has been focused on compiling a list of ethnic Tigray and Ethiopian National Defense Forces soldiers arbitrarily detained by the Ethiopian government and being held in internment camps across the country, and some even killed. Desta has so far compiled a list of 8,000 Tigrayans, close to half of the 17,000 the Ethiopian government has admitted to detaining.
We have started compiling the list of detainees from November 2020. Because soon after the war started, Abiy Ahmed immediately started detaining the ethnic Tigrayans who were members of the Ethiopian National Defense Force. So their numbers are believed to be from 15,000 to 17,000, and they are languishing in detention in prisons in Addis Ababa, in the south part of Ethiopia, in Afar, and in Redawa. So we have been collecting data about the details about these ex-members of the Ethiopian National Defense Force, for example, in which location they are being detained, the number, their military rank. So we have managed to collect details for about 8,000 to 10,000 of them.
No matter how hard or painful it gets, Desta says he's going to continue his work, hoping and believing that these victims and their loved ones will one day be served justice.
I believe I have a good reason to keep doing it for more than 21 months, because I believe it's very important to document all the war crimes committed in Tigray. No matter how high the emotional toll is, I will keep doing it until justice in any way is delivered to those victims and the people of Tigray.
Well, that wraps up our news for the hour. I'm Mary from Ala Tigray. Thank you for tuning in.